Hello, I am Heath Radford with the Wayne County Museum, and I'm here with Doc Heidicker. Good to have you with us, Doc.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so tell us a little bit about your museum event that you're going to be doing in May with us.
I get to talk about one of my favorite topics in the whole world, the Tuskegee Airmen. And I have my notes here because what I want to do today is just briefly give everybody a preview of some of what we're going to talk about.
Awesome, amazing. I cannot wait to hear.
Now, for starters, the head of the Tuskegee Airmen was Benjamin O. Davis, and he has an amazing relationship with a General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr., who is also important to American military history and to the history of World War II. So that's one of the things we're gonna talk about. One of the other people that I'm going to focus in on is General Charles McGee, who was actually promoted to Brigadier General by President Trump in 2020. So a fascinating story. We'll look at his World War II days. He stayed in the Air Force, his extremely successful Air Force career, and his post career also. In World War II, the Germans had an organization called the Circus Zaharius. Circus is basically German for circus. So it was the Circus Zaharius in English. Zaharius was the name of the German who was in charge of it. And it was an organization that had captured American aircraft, fighters, bombers, whatever they could get their hands on. And they would fly them from base to base, from Luftwaffe base to Luftwaffe base, to let the German pilots actually fly these things and see what their capabilities were. So when they were going up against them in combat, they had a much better appreciation for what they were capable of. And again, there's a relationship between the Circus Zaharius and the Tuskegee Airmen that we'll talk about. Talk about the time, and this wasn't something that happened all that often in World War II, a Tuskegee Airman sank a German destroyer.
Oh, wow.
Now, we'll talk about how that happened. The other amazing accomplishment is the Germans had a jet fighter in World War II, the Messerschmitt 262. That was the world's first operational jet fighter. Now, because it was a jet, it was significantly faster than our fighters. And the Tuskegee Airmen shot down several of them. So that's another thing that we'll talk about. We'll talk about the actual aerial combat and how they were able to shoot down such a high-performance aircraft. A lot of what I want to talk about, too, is how Americans today know about the Tuskegee Airmen. And, of course, as you know, what Americans know about history is largely what they've seen in movies. So there's been 2 Hollywood movies about the Tuskegee Airmen, and we'll talk about both of them. One was actually called Tuskegee Airmen in 1995, and then Red Tails in 2012. 2 really good films, but we will talk about those. In 2006, the Tuskegee Airmen Congressional Gold Medal was awarded. Another thing that we'll talk about. When you look at the story of the Tuskegee Airmen in World War II, there are some real heroes and some real villains. And that's another thing that we're going to talk about. Who were the real good guys as far as helping to make this happen? Who were the real bad guys who stood in the way, whose racism got in the way of their being good military leaders, and how we had American officers do everything in their power to put a stop to the Tuskegee Airmen. I mean, amazing when you think about it, that here we are fighting a world war, and you got American officers who are more concerned about their own racism than accomplishing the mission, which is winning the war. So we're going to talk about heroes and villains. I'm going to talk about art, because when you look at aviation and military art, the Tuskegee Airmen art is among the most sought after, especially if it's signed by Tuskegee Airmen. So that's another thing that we're going to talk about. I think There's a couple of categories of art that's very, very much in demand. Doolittle Raiders,
Mhm.
but Tuskegee Airmen is right at the top of what people are looking for.
And for our folks who don't know, Doc has an amazing military art collection. Right where we're filming here at his house,
Mhm.
and he has an amazing collection. So,
Well, and we just might bring a few pieces to the lecture, and if people are trying to throw money at my wife to purchase them, we'd probably let them.
sounds
That
great
would
to
be
me.
okay,
I love a good visual man at a
Well,
presentation.
and we do have pieces actually signed individually by Tuskegee Airmen, which
Wow.
makes them even more cool. So overall, we're going to look at who the Tuskegee Airmen were, their extraordinary contributions to America. Um, if it weren't for the Tuskegee Airmen, would President Truman been able to desegregate the armed forces? When he did, I think the contribution of the Tuskegee Airmen really contributed to that. But just when you look at all of the great American heroes through our history, what the Tuskegee Airmen accomplished and what they had to overcome. I mean, you look at white American pilots in World War II and what they had to overcome as far
That's right.
as the danger and what they had to learn and what they had to endure in order to do that. But then you look at the Tuskegee Airmen, and they had to endure all of that and then put up with all the racism and craziness that they had to put up with. And we're going to talk about that. And people who come will get a pretty good look at who the Tuskegee Airmen were, what they accomplished, and how significant they are to the history of our nation.
Wow, well, I am so excited. And as you guys can tell, we have tons of information that's going to be given out about the Tuskegee Airmen. So you may come in with some knowledge, you may come in with no knowledge about these guys, but when you leave, you will come out with a ton of new information learning about from our amazing doc. And the event is May 13th at the Wayne County Museum at 2 o'clock. The event is absolutely free, so come bring, you guys can bring yourselves, bring your families, just come out and learn something very important about these men who've made such a big impact on our history. Doc, another thing we like to do is, because the museum plays such a big part of Wayne County, what do you like about the Wayne County Museum?
Well, the fact that it started off as a USO,
Mm-hmm.
that is like the coolest thing in the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
But Goldsboro, Wayne County are important historically to this nation. I mean, when you look at the importance of Goldsboro during the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Sherman and 100,000 Yankees were here in Goldsboro when Lee surrendered to Grant in 1865. That's amazing when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest battle fought in North Carolina, the Battle of Bentonville, was fought because the Confederates were trying to prevent Sherman's army from reaching Goldsboro. So important stuff. And of course, today, the home of the 4th Fighter Wing, greatest fighter wing in the history of the world. And, you know, so any museum that celebrates the history of this county and this town,
Mm-hmm.
very important stuff.
Oh, wow. And again, thank you, Doc, for sitting down with us today and telling us a little about your event. Again, May 13th at 2 o'clock p.m. at the Wayne County Museum. We look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.